And most people believe that ignoring someone is simply about cutting them off cold, as if it's some silent form of revenge. But the truth is that's not what real emotional distance is about, especially when you're dealing with someone who once had your full attention. What makes your silence so powerful isn't that you're disappearing, it's that you're finally unavailable in a way they never expected. You're not angry, you're not bitter, and you're not trying to prove anything. You're just no longer participating. That's when it hits them, because attention is valuable currency, and they've been spending yours like it's unlimited. Late replies, you stayed patient. Mixed signals, you stayed understanding. They would push, pull, disappear for a bit, and you stayed steady, hoping they'd eventually meet you where you were. But they didn't, and that's when something in you snapped, not in an emotional explosion, but in quiet clarity. You realized they didn't value your presence because it was always available. The moment you stopped giving them what they took for granted, everything changed. Now they're scrolling through your stories, wondering why your energy feels different. Now they're asking themselves, why hasn't he reached out? And that discomfort they're feeling, that's your silence doing the talking. It's not that they suddenly miss you. It's that they're starting to feel the absence of being centered in your world. When someone is used to having your energy on demand, your texts, your interest, your emotional availability, and you take it away without explanation, it's not just confusing, it's confronting. They start to realize that you're not where they left you. The game they thought they were playing is over, not because you lost, but because you stopped playing. Here's the part no one tells you. When you truly detach, not out of ego but out of self-respect, your absence becomes a mirror. They begin to see the things they didn't want to face. Their own inconsistencies, their inability to match your energy, and the cracks in their behavior that your attention used to cover up. You were the stability they never acknowledged, but now that it's gone, it's deafening. Your silence isn't empty. It's full of everything they ignored while you were still showing up. What they didn't realize at first was that your silence had weight. Not because it was loud, but because it meant something. You weren't ignoring them just to play game. You weren't trying to trigger a reaction. You were finally choosing yourself. And that's why it becomes impossible to ignore. Silence becomes louder when it comes from someone who once cared deeply. When someone who was once fully present suddenly stops reacting, stops validating, and stops showing up in predictable patterns, it sends a message no words could ever deliver. That message pierces through their ego like nothing else, because now they're not just wondering where you went, they're wondering why you're at peace without them. They're used to people being upset. They're used to people blowing up their phone, demanding closure, chasing them for answers, trying to win them back through explanations or gifts. But you didn't do that. You didn't try to make them feel bad. You didn't try to spark jealousy. You didn't even try to prove a point. You just removed your energy. Now, sitting with that emptiness, they're realizing the truth they never wanted to admit. They never expected you to stop showing up. That's what's unsettling them, not the silence itself, but what your silence represents. It tells them that you've recalibrated. It tells them your world didn't stop spinning when they pulled back. It tells them you're no longer emotionally anchored to their validation. This is the moment when people start doing something most never see coming. They start replaying the entire connection in their mind, but this time without control. They start remembering all the things you did right, the way you listened, the way you stayed calm, the way you offered consistency in a world full of temporary connection. Suddenly, those things that once felt boring or too available now feel like everything they've been missing, not because they've changed, but because you stopped trying to convince them of your value. Ironically, that's what finally makes them feel it, because now they're left with the version of themselves that didn't appreciate you when they had you. And that version is a hard one to face. So your silence isn't just a void, it's a reminder of what they had and what they had and what they let go. The longer you stay silent, the more they realize that your absence isn't temporary. It's intentional, not forced, not bitter, but grounded. And that's what really gets to them, because now they're not thinking, is he ignoring me to get a reaction? They're thinking, is he really done? They're thinking, is he really done? That uncertainty wasn't there before. Before, they knew how to pull your strings. They knew that a little attention from them could pull you back in, but now, and they don't know. And that uncertainty is what they can't stand. At one point, if you left a breadcrumb trail, they'd pick it up. But now nothing works, and the silence they once assumed was weakness has revealed itself as strength. Here's the twist she never accounted for. You're not the same person anymore. That version of you, the one who waited for her replies, overanalyzed her messages, and stayed up late wondering what went wrong, is no longer available. That version disappeared the moment you stop begging for the bare minimum. And she feels the emotional power she thought she had over you is gone. The scary part for her is that it didn't get taken away. It was given up. She gave it up the moment she assumed you'd never walk away. She gave it up when she thought your love was an endless resource, something she could pick up later if she ever felt like it. But now, the timeline has shifted. Now you're the one who's become unavailable, not out of revenge, but because you've grown. And that growth isn't something you can fake. Real growth shows up in how you no longer flinch when she enters or exits your life. It shows up in how you value your peace more than her attention. It shows up in how you refuse to participate in emotional tug-of-war that shifts the unshakable calm. It does something to her. It makes her feel something she's not used to. Irrelevance. Not because you hate her, but because you're now so focused on yourself that her opinion no longer carries the same weight. She expected to be missed, but now she's the one feeling the loss. And that changes everything. When a woman realizes she's no longer the center of your focus, when your world no longer orbits around hers, when she's no longer the reason you pick up your phone, she doesn't feel empowered. She feels forgotten. And for someone whose pride once fed on your attention, that quiet realization cuts far deeper than any words could. Now here's the moment everything flips. She's scrolling through her feed like she always does, bored, distracted, half looking for something, half looking for nothing, and out of nowhere, she wonders what you're doing. Not because she misses you out loud, not because she's ready to admit anything, but because the silence is too loud. Now she starts doing what people do when they're unsure. She checks. She looks, she searches without saying a word. Your name, your profile, your stories. Anything to confirm you're still reachable, still somehow orbiting the space you used to share. But this time, what she finds doesn't bring comfort. You're not reacting. You're not watching her stories. You're not posting cryptic quotes. You're just gone, not physically, but energetically. And that's when it hits her. She's not in control anymore, because the very thing she used to rely on, your emotional investment, is now nowhere to be found. What most people don't realize is that women notice this shift long before they admit it. They'll say everything's fine. They'll pretend they're unfazed. But their bodies react differently when a man's presence truly exits their space. It's not just about missing your texts or attention. It's about sensing that your energy is no longer directed toward her. That realization is like hitting emotional gravity in reverse. She's left floating without something to resist, without something to push against. That's when she starts replaying things. Not the drama, not the arguments, not the emotional highs and lows, but the calm, the consistency, the feeling of being anchored to someone who never needed to prove anything. She starts missing the person who made her feel safe just by being steady, the one who didn't chase but showed up, the one who didn't beg but cared deeply, the one who was strong enough to be vulnerable, and even stronger when he chose silence over chaos. And suddenly she starts wondering if she made a mistake, not because she lost you, but because now she's no longer sure if she can reach you again. And that doubt doesn't just sit quietly in her chest. It grows. It whispers during the day and keeps her up at night, because now she's no longer wondering if you still care. She's wondering if you ever will again. That's the moment you become unforgettable. By now you've said nothing. You've done nothing. And yet everything has changed because your silence has become a mirror. And she's forced to face something she's been avoiding. The version of you she lost might have been the best one she ever had. Not because you were perfect, not because you gave her everything, but because you gave her the one thing she can't seem to find anywhere else: your presence. The kind of presence that doesn't need attention to be powerful. The kind that doesn't need drama to be noticed. The kind that doesn't chase but is impossible to forget. Now she's watching the days go by, each one without a message from you. Each one without a glance, a reply, or a reaction. At first, she thought you were playing a game. Then she thought you'd eventually fold. But now she knows this isn't a tactic. This isn't emotional manipulation. This is transformation. You're no longer the man who needs to be wanted. You become the man who knows. He doesn't have to prove his value. Well, that shift, that quiet internal shift, is what haunts her. She expected your silence to last a few days, maybe a week. Then, like always, you'd come back, you'd break, you'd reach out. But that day never came. And now the question she's stuck with isn't a why did he stop? It's, how long has he been preparing to let go? Because the truth is, letting go doesn't happen overnight. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet. It happens in the small moments, when you stop checking your phone, when you stop replaying the past, when you finally realize that holding on is costing you more peace than it's worth. And when a woman feels that you've reached that place, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity, she starts to panic. Out of clarity, she starts to panic. Not because she's afraid of losing you, but because she already has. And now there's no conversation, no breadcrumb, no smile or post that can bring you back to the version of you she once had easy access to, because that version is no longer available. You've evolved, and now she's not chasing you out of need. She's chasing the part of herself that wishes she had chosen differently before you disappeared into the man you were always meant to become. What's happening now is deeper than missing you. It's not about late-night texts or wanting a second chance. It's about realizing that her influence over you is gone. That subtle control she once had, the one where she knew how to shift your mood with just a message or get your attention with one vague story post. That control has vanished, and she feels it because now she's realizing you're not just unavailable, you're untouchable. You're not lingering in the past, hoping she'll see the light. You're not standing at an emotional door, waiting for her to knock again. You've walked away, and more importantly, you've closed the door behind you. That's the part she didn't see coming. See, a lot of women expect space to be temporary. They assume they'll come back once they've figured things out, and you'll still be there waiting with open arms. But when she finally looked back, you weren't waiting, you weren't angry, you weren't begging. You were thriving. And that's the part she can't stomach. Not because she wants to stop your growth, but because she never expected your growth would come without her. She thought she had time to explore her options, time to test your patience, time to disappear and reappear without consequence. But time ran out, and now what hurts her for isn't just losing you. It's knowing she didn't recognize your worth until it was no longer offered freely. That's the kind of realization that hits hard. Not because she wants to admit it, she probably never will, but because now every man she compares to you feels slightly off, slightly less stable, slightly less safe, because none of them are you. And that's what your silence created. Not just absence, not just distance, but contrast. She felt what it was like to be around a man who didn't need her to be okay. A man who had emotional depth without chaos, who had strength without arrogance, who had standards and stuck to them when it counted most. Aki, you became the man she can't replace, and that's the real fear she's sitting with now. Not that you're gone, but that someone else will experience the version of you she didn't respect until it was too late. And trust me, that fear lingers longer than any heartbreak ever could. So now she watches quietly from a distance. She doesn't reach out because her pride won't let her. But every time you don't respond, every time you post without thinking of her, every time you show up more focused, more grounded, more unbothered, it stings. Not because you're being cruel, but because she finally sees the truth. You don't need her validation to feel whole anymore. And once a woman realizes that the emotional grip she had on you is gone, she doesn't just regret the past. She questions her own worth in your story. But you've already moved forward. And if this message hit you in the chest, if you felt this shift and know you're on the right path, then don't stop here. Like the video, drop a comment if you've been through this, and hit subscribe, because the man you're becoming deserves everything he was once chasing. Stay silent, stay solid, and let them feel the difference.